Welcome to the Horizon Audiofiles, a podcast of the Defense Horizon Journal. The Defense Horizon Journal is a professional and academic journal that features essays, reports, and analyses covering geopolitics and law, security and defense policy, peace and conflict studies, applied military science, as well as developments in weapons technology. For more information, go to www.tdhj.org.
Episode number 11. Legislation as an Instrument of Cognitive Warfare by Peter Pijpers. Influence the Will, an Introduction. In May 2024, Annalena Baerbock, German Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs, attributed a cyber attack on the German Social Democratic Party, SPD, to APT-28, an agent of the Russian Military Intelligence Service, the GRU. The attack, most likely a spear phishing attack, was part of a broader campaign to undermine the June 2024 European (EU) elections. Similarly, NATO's North Atlantic Council expressed concerns as it witnessed subversive and undermining cyber attacks against the Baltic states, Poland, and the United Kingdom. Elections are precarious periods for democracies. They are conceptual scenes where a society moves from one set of elected lawmakers to another. In any system, whether organizing a military campaign or welding a heating system, scenes pose vulnerabilities. Liberal democracies have more vulnerabilities, since there are more scenes in a democratic system than authoritarian states, where there is often no genuine division of power, let alone a change of power. Influencing the people's will through elections has long been part of the game plan in the bipolar Cold War. The Soviet active measures and American political warfare covered election interference to persuade or manipulate the cognition of foreign audiences and political leaders to elect or put in place a government in line with Soviet or US interests, respectively. While subduing the opponent's will has been the pinnacle of warfare since Sun Tzu, the notion of cognitive warfare has gained traction with the growth of cyberspace and the possibility of influencing opposing audiences directly via social media. Cyberspace is a man-made domain that has added three layers to the existing information environment: the hardware itself, the virtual persona we use to communicate online, and the data and protocols that make communication possible. These additional layers provide new target surfaces that state and non-state actors will want to protect or use to engage with others. The dawn of cyberspace has enabled three cyber-related categories of activities: digital intelligence gathering, espionage, through scanning or copying of data confined in virtual repositories, subversive digital influence operations, and digital undermining. The latter cyber attacks are activities in the virtual dimension that undermine cyberspace with binary code, modify or manipulate data, and degrade or destroy the hardware or protocols, resulting in virtual and/or physical effects in cyberspace. Digital influence operations use cyberspace as a vector, without affecting it, to target the human, cognitive dimension of groups or audiences, making use of content, words, memes, and footage as weapons. Apart from large state-supported activities such as Stuxnet in the past, most cyber attacks witnessed in Ukraine and Gaza have had limited impact. Conversely, state-level influence operations, including the Russian interference during the 2016 US presidential election, did have strategic effects. Apart from the activities in cyberspace, the wars in Ukraine and Gaza witnessed new actors and technologies emerging. Non-state actors, including Anonymous, Microsoft, and Elon Musk, play a role in these conflicts without becoming a belligerent party, and artificial intelligence is used in targeting systems in the Gaza war. These topics raise not only operational and ethical questions but also legal ones, for example, on DDoS attacks by a non-state actor and the International Humanitarian Law, IHL, or the IHL Article 49 AP1's coverage of cyber attacks. Using or exploiting varying interpretations states have on international law can even be used as an instrument of power to affect perception and cognition. This form of lawfare can be a tool in influencing the cognition of target audiences through cyberspace. States can cherry-pick or assertively exploit the variations in interpretations of international law to pursue or defend their national interests as a means of cognitive warfare. What is cognitive warfare? From a security or military perspective, the cognitive domain is the pinnacle of warfare. Thinkers such as Thucydides or von Clausewitz argue that the essence of warfare is to subdue an enemy, meaning making sure that the opposite actor, willingly or unwillingly, becomes convinced that it should change its behavior and act under our will. In the past, The cognitive domain was influenced by physical acts, hence indirectly via the threat of the destruction of armies or capitals. With the inception of cyberspace and the increased knowledge of cognitive psychology, cognitive warfare nowadays also directly targets the mind, making use of influence operations, information operations, and psychological warfare, hence, warfare without the use of kinetic force. Cognitive activities can be applied to persuade our conscious mind. However, their focus is on exploiting our subconscious mind, the main drivers of our behavior, biases, heuristics, intuition, and emotions. As a conceptual notion, cognitive warfare cannot be easily defined. In a research paper by Klusel, cognitive warfare is compared to hacking the minds of individuals to erode the trust that underpins every society, which includes the use of neuroscience and technology. Hung and Hung argue that information warfare is a subset of cognitive warfare, and influence operations are merely the cyber-related elements of information warfare. Others argue the opposite, stating that cognitive warfare has absorbed information warfare. In both cases, there is a shift from controlling the media, information, to controlling the brain, cognition. NATO's proposed definition is deliberate, synchronized military and non-military activities throughout the continuum of competition designed to affect audience attitudes, perceptions and behaviors to gain, maintain and protect cognitive superiority. Other definitions of cognitive warfare argue that cognitive warfare is a strategy that focuses on altering how a target population thinks and how it acts through that. Or they claim that, in cognitive warfare, the ultimate aim is to alter our perception of reality and deceive the brain in order to affect our decision-making. In all definitions and descriptions of cognitive war, trust and truth are the primary targets. Cognitive warfare via cyberspace. With the growth of cyberspace, our societies have become more digitalized, but also warfare is digitalized. The potential and actual impact of cyber activities is widely debated. Though some scholars argue that cyber warfare equals regular warfare, a more common view is that most cyber operations will not reach the threshold of war. This means that labeling cyber operations will benefit from looking at the effects they might have rather than the act itself. A recent example of large-scale cyber activities is the Russia-Ukraine war. Since the start of the invasion in February 2022, more than 3,500 attacks have taken place. Various actors, including states, have undertaken these attacks. However, 95% of the attacks can be labeled as DDoS, defacements, or hack and leak operations. And some 90% of these were executed by non-state actors. DDoS and defacements are what Gartzke and Lindsay would categorize as hindrances or nuisances, causing neither death and destruction nor directly supporting a military campaign. Though some cyber attacks supported operational-level military or diplomatic campaigns, including digital espionage or severe wipe-aware attacks, no cyber attacks with severe strategic impact, similar to a cyber Pearl Harbor, have been registered. Despite the scale, the impact of cyberspace activities in the Russia-Ukraine war appears to be marginal, possibly due to Ukrainian resilience, supported by firms such as Microsoft, and faltering Russian operations. There are, however, some notable exceptions, as some cyber operations did serve their purpose. First, on the eve of the invasion, Russia attacked the Viasat satellite internet connection, imposing a digital blackout on Ukrainian forces. Second is the fervent online strategic communication by Ukrainian President Zelensky to foreign parliaments that has resulted in diplomatic support and the supply of funds, military systems, and ammunition. Contrary to undermining cyber attacks, digital influence operations can have strategic effects. While influence operations are not inherently malign, they intend to affect deliberate understanding and autonomous decision-making processes of humans or groups in a conscious or preferably subconscious manner. In the end, cognitive warfare via influence operations in cyberspace does not aim at the destruction of humans but at reformatting the target audience with values, morality and the understanding of good and evil in line with what the attackers want. Since the annexation of Crimea, pro-Russian state and non-state actors conducted cyber-enabled disruptive propaganda and disinformation campaigns to create an information environment in which confronting views and perceptions exist. The main purpose of Russian information confrontation operations is to demoralize the Ukrainian population and to drive a wedge between Ukraine and its Western allies. Influence operations are also used to target domestic Russian audiences. Narratives used are Western Russophobia, the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, or the endemic corruption within the Ukrainian government. Ukraine similarly exploits social media. From the invasion on, President Zelensky has addressed his population online and kept up the morale of his troops, positively affecting the cognitive dimension of both friend and foe. For Ukraine, international support is its lifeline and thus a center of gravity, but consequently also an Achilles heel. Influence operations, especially manipulative ones, are inherently deceptive and use heuristics and biases, luring the target audience away from a rational decision-making process in favor of what Petty and Cassiopo call the peripheral route. The peripheral route is invoked by luring a targeted audience towards a socially divisive topic, impairing their ability to process incoming data due to the emotional or provocative sentiment attached. Hung and Hung make a similar assessment, arguing that cognitive warfare uses two dimensions: the psychological techniques, how our brain works, based on heuristics and repeated stimulation, and, second, the cognitive handling of external information. To influence humans, a gap, or free energy, needs to exist, or to be created, between prior predictions and incoming stimuli. In effect, the target audience needs to start doubting, which is in line with the Russian approach of information confrontation. Western democracies are more vulnerable to manipulative influence operations as an element of cognitive warfare, and hence for Russian information confrontation, due to their open societies, built on the freedom of speech, of press, and freedom to vote and be elected. Notions that are embedded in the principles of legality and legitimacy go hand in hand with the trust people have in the government, judges, and traditional, often written, media. Western democracies entirely use free energy to discuss and absorb incoming stimuli, create new ideas, innovate, fail, and learn. This is in contrast to authoritarian states that try to undermine incoming, foreign, stimuli, information, and new ideas and make sure that the inoculated perception, or prior beliefs, of the population is aligned with the state-controlled information environment and not distorted by false or factual evidence that will change the prior belief and create doubt. Legislation in cognitive warfare. In addition to the example of Russia's information confrontation, the Chinese three warfares is another example of cognitive warfare. This doctrine, governed mainly by the Chinese Communist Parties, CCP, United Front Work Department and the People's Liberation Army, aims to maintain the CCP's political power and control the prevailing discourse and influence perceptions to advance China's interest. To suppress incoming stimuli and propagate a benign image of the People's Republic of China, PRC, diasporas are dissuaded to voice dissenting opinions. The internet and social media are frequently censored domestically. The three warfares doctrine not only entails a persuasive and manipulative but also a legal perception on how to change the attitude and, hence, the behavior of targeted audiences, at home or abroad. Persuasive public opinion warfare, or media warfare, aims to shape targeted audiences through information derived and propagated by mass information channels, traditional, television, newspaper, movies, and the internet. Public opinion warfare relates to shaping, online, public opinion to transmit a consistent message to the targeted audience in a way favorable to Chinese positions. Where public opinion warfare focuses on framing or highlighting some aspects of the truth and neglecting others, often with a pinch of humor, psychological warfare is more manipulative in nature. Psychological warfare involves using information to pressure an opponent and create damaging or deleterious habits and ways of thinking, to reduce its will to resist, and perhaps even to induce defeatism and surrender. Psychological warfare makes use of a variety of techniques, including intimidation, religious interference, dissuasion, manipulation, and deception. Interestingly, the Chinese three warfares are applicable in all phases of conflict, from peace to war, and make use of diverging legal interpretations to influence others. Legal warfare is designed to justify a course of action, forging a normative environment favorable to China. The PRC's legal warfare, which echoes Western debates on lawfare, is a tool of non-kinetic warfare that offers influence over an actor's behavior to achieve strategic ends. Successful legal warfare limits others' freedom of movement while expanding the PRC's freedom of action. Three warfares is not a specific policy of the CCP. The effectiveness of the three warfares lies in the fact that it is a society-wide endeavor. When addressing foreign audiences, the three warfare's activities make use of the PRC's entire media landscape so that a given message is reiterated and reinforced by different sources and different versions. Outlets include media channels, CGTN, cultural institutes, Confucius institutes, Chinese exchange students, diaspora communities, think tanks, and the Chinese diplomatic network to affect foreign audiences. Law as an instrument of warfare. The PRC's legal warfare exploits the ambiguity in international law related to new developments, a discourse that is not new. Nuclear weapons or aeroplanes were introduced after the laws of armed conflict, IHL, were conceived. However, since international law is based on principles including military advantage, distinction, proportionality, and necessity, not on specific situations or techniques, the law will still apply. In practice, a discourse will start on how to apply the existing international law to the new development, for instance, in the United Nations group of governmental experts or the open-ended working group. On the one hand, since international law is based on principles from which rules derive, it has always been the purpose of the body of international law to provide legal room to maneuver so generic rules can be applied to a specific situation or new developments. On the other hand, new developments can cause challenges, not least due to the speed of technological developments, including artificial intelligence, human enhancement, drones, or cyberspace. This parallax causes uncertainty regarding how to apply the law. In cyberspace, there is debate on whether sovereignty, a legal obligation in traditional international law, is a rule, obligation, and principle or merely a principle of law. The latter is the UK position. This is not a semantic discussion because if sovereignty is a principle, hence not an obligation, it cannot be violated. The articles on state responsibility state that an internationally wrongful act constitutes a breach of a primary rule of law, an obligation, that can be attributed to a state. If sovereignty is breached by a state that does not see it as an obligation, the redress or countermeasure could be a violation of international law, in which case a row could escalate into a conflict. Another source of ambiguity is whether cyberspace, as such, is part of the territory of a state or not, and thus subject to its laws. In many Western views, territory includes the soil, the territorial sea, and the air column above it. Hence, not space in general or the virtual aspects of cyberspace, the zeros and ones. In that sense, the virtual dimension of cyberspace is borderless. In many authoritarian states, cyberspace in total is linked to the control of territorial integrity. Hence, the PRC will argue that it has digital sovereignty over cyberspace on its soil while Western states only have territorial control over the hardware on its soil. Moreover, while Western states argue that international law supersedes national law, the Russian constitution argues that national law has prerogative over international law. Conversely, the PRC uses international law to underline their claims, e.g., in the South China Sea, and will dispute the Western view that solely natural, and not artificial, islands are part of a territorial claim. Finally, for the CCP, a clear distinction between war and peace does not exist. Based on the three warfares, these forms of warfare commence before actual military engagement and are conducted to shape and prepare the battlefield and its participants. All these forms of the three warfares are applicable across the entire spectrum of war and peace. How to counter the use of lawfare? The use of law as an instrument of power to affect perception and cognition is possible since there are ongoing legal disputes, and states hold varying interpretations on how to apply international law to cyberspace. To effectively counter activities of cognitive warfare, it is critical to understand the aggressor's intent before responding. NATO and EU states must raise public awareness of possible foreign cognitive warfare activities, including lawfare, align common positions within the alliances, and finally, the discourse on whether new law is needed remains valid. First, states, especially liberal democracies, need to realize that Chinese and Russian cognitive warfare differ in intent and depth. Russian activities are meant to sow confusion via the dissemination of information that conflicts or confronts existing knowledge. An example of this was the fire hose of falsehoods that followed Russia's downing of MH17. Russian cognitive and influence operations can be seen as a blunt instrument affecting audiences in foreign states with no other intent than to confuse, sow discord, and undermine trust in democratic foundations. While Russia exploits the variances of international law, it would rather neglect it altogether. Conversely, Chinese activities are subtle in nature and clearly intend to uphold or improve foreign audiences' benign image of the PRC. The PRC is reliant on international law but favors a renegotiation of its foundations since, according to the PRC, the current body of international law is a reflection of Western interests. In countering the cognitive activities of Russia or the PRC, the intent of the aggressor needs to be considered. The worst mistake to make is to assess the cognitive act according to Western standards. Raising awareness is, in general, an effective means to counter cognitive warfare. The US citizens were unaware of the impact social media campaigns by foreign actors could have in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. A naivety that had already largely vanished with the 2018 midterm elections. Free access to education is pivotal, and where this is already the case, educational programs for schools on the advantages and dangers of an open and free, hence unfiltered, internet. Besides raising awareness, coalition alignment can also block foreign cognitive warfare, meaning formulating a common position and forming a common bloc among NATO, EU member states with partners, including Japan and Australia. Adversaries will make use of the scenes in these coalitions, especially when there is no common rationale, as we currently see in the fragile alignment and hence increased friction within the varying positions of NATO, EU member states regarding the Ukraine war. Most international legal scholars will argue that current law is sufficient. Still, refinement is needed on how to apply the law, for which more state practice and legal statements, opiniones, by states are needed. There is a danger that this is wishful thinking. It will be a real challenge to align the diverging opinions of states, as sound legal opinions or as a reflection of political pragmatism. Some states are already entrenched or have seen the benefits of using law as an instrument of power, e.g. during UN, OEWG sessions. Moreover, new developments, AI, quantum computing, are more complex than they were in the past, and international law can no longer keep the same pace as new developments. EU lawmakers are not yet able to fully grasp the potential and the danger of developments such as AI. However, they correctly see the need for legislation, the result of which are laws that first and foremost reflect the consensus building of the legislative process but will be highly ambiguous in content, which in turn fuels the legal cherry-picking and hence the use of law as an instrument of power, a devil's dilemma. The author, Dr. Peter BMJ Pijpers, is an associate professor of cyber operations with the Netherlands Defense Academy, a researcher with the University of Amsterdam Center for International Law, and a non-resident fellow with the University of South Florida Global and National Security Institute. Dr. Pijpers has published on the legal and cognitive dimensions of influence operations in cyberspace and how armed forces can maneuver in the information environment. The views contained in this article are the author's alone and do not represent the views of the Netherlands Defense Academy.
This was the Horizon Audiofiles, a podcast of the Defense Horizon Journal. For more information, go to www.tdhj.org. Thank you for listening.